Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am so excited to have conversations centered around the world of men's mental wellness in the modern age, where we are today. We're all doing our best, right? Moving forward as best we possibly can. And in one of the areas that we always get requests for people to for topics to focus on, it's around relationships. And I mean, I think that's probably no surprise for any guy out there who's listening to this that's in a relationship. They're not always the easiest things in the world, are they? And who we have on today, she's an expert. She really, really is. She's been in the mental health space for 40 years. But for the last 15 or so, she's really been focusing on the idea of relationships and love. Riana Milne is her name. You can look up her and her books, Live Beyond Your Dreams, Love Beyond Your Dreams, at RianaMilne.com. She also has, it's crazy to say, an AI version of what it is that she does that has just been launched as well. We have a really good conversation today. It's going to be the first of many, I'm certain, because really time gets slippery when we do these. But today's conversation is centered around the idea of trauma that we bring into relationships, knowingly or unknowingly, many times. And what trauma is, we go through that. It's certainly a word these days that has many meanings for many different people. We dissect all of that and things that may have happened when we were a kid, whether we were aware of it. Sometimes there's big T stuff, major events, or not aware of it, small little things, interactions that might happen when we're a child that we then take on and bring into relationships, and how that can cause static in relationships. We really focus on a lot of these things. It's a beautiful conversation. I really appreciate her. She's a very, very busy lady. I'm very grateful that she took time out of her day. She appreciates the cause as to what He Changed It is all about. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Riana Milne. Riana, I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you on heCast today. If there's one topic that comes up over and over and over again that is many times the root of the other topics, if there was one thing that men go through that we get requests for, to say, hey, can we get some cover on this, please? Can we get some resources? Can we get some help, some ideas? It's relationships. And to have you on here today, it's a real honor for me. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for taking time out of your insanely busy schedule to come on heCast today.
Of course. I'm really happy to be here. I work with a lot of men. I have for over 40 years and really love helping them, because the progression of, once they understand what childhood trauma is and then how it's showing up in their adult life, it's just like the lights go off and we can change everything. So giving them that extra confidence, that ability to communicate, to feel safe, to share their emotions, it's wonderful work. I really enjoy working with my male clients.
I'm really glad to hear that. You brought up the word already, trauma, and I mean, if there's a word that in our time and place in 2026 that is loaded, if there's a loaded word out there, it's probably the word trauma. And the way that I always look at it is trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t. And I'm excited to unpack this with you a little bit, because really, at the end of the day, there are a lot of relationships out there where there are people who are just they're missing connections with each other. Correct. And it's not even necessarily their fault of what's going on in the present moment. It's because of patterns that have developed from a long time ago, perhaps from an epic event like trauma. Could you describe, in your opinion, your take on trauma, and maybe perhaps what it used to mean, what it means now? 40 years is a long time to understand the evolution of that word in our society.
Well, it's really interesting. I went for triple master's in psychology and graduated year 2000. So I've been a licensed mental health counselor for 26 years. Then I became a certified coach for singles and couples in 2009 and 10. So I've been doing that 11 years. But I had a couple of traumatic relationships myself. And I had a question: why am I attracting people that hurt me? Like, I'm a nice lady, I'm smart, I'm a great mom, I'm successful in business. Why am I successful in business but struggle in love? And I went to 7 therapist friends when I had a toxic partner. And they were all surprised by his action. He had a secret life. And it shocked me and it was very devastating. And nobody had the answers. And I'm like, well, what is it that he has? So the word childhood trauma did not even exist. So I went into the psychological libraries and did a whole lot of research to help myself. And then I came up with the slogan, you can't change what you don't know or understand. Because I didn't understand it. So how could I change it? How could I pick a better partner if I didn't know what I was doing wrong? So I've been in the shoes of all my clients. I get where they've come from. So it was interesting. I started talking about childhood trauma by developing the childhood trauma checklist, which we'll do today, which is 10 items, very simple to understand. My clients can look at this and say yes or no, very simply, if they had these situations happen to them or not. And I started talking about that because it came out in 2012, the list. And in 2015, a fellow psychologist said to me, you're making this up. This is not in the DSM-4, which is our psychological manual, and it doesn't exist. You're making it up. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not making it up. So I was a rebel. I started talking about this in 2015, childhood trauma. And it's interesting now how it's such a buzzword. I'm like,
it really is.
That education did get out there. So I've been on podcasts since 2015 talking about this and trying to educate because it was such an aha moment. And my number one bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams, is based on the research that I found. I got up to 400 pages. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to stop. And then I started creating notebooks for my clients. So for my couples, I have Relationship Rescue. For the singles, I have Dating to Mating. So it's all research-based education, what I teach. Yeah. And then in 16 or 17, I saw another chart that had come out from Kaiser Permanente called the ACE test. And I said, how could they miss abandonment? How could they miss bullying? How could they miss my kids that were in foster care? Because my list came from all my work experience as a therapist. I worked in a mental health unit for kids 5 through 19. And they were critically mentally upset, right? Emotionally upset kids. Yep. I worked in the schools from kindergarten all the way through college as what's called a student assistance counselor, helping the emotionally upset student. I worked in my own private practice called Therapy by the Sea, which I still have. And I worked with women and teens, 2 different drug and alcohol rehab centers, because I'm a drug and alcohol counselor too. So how did they develop this addiction? So the addiction studies goes back to original childhood trauma. And many of these women were from the prison system. So I had found no matter their age, their race, the culture, their upbringing, these top 10 traumas kept showing up. So as I was doing the research, I created the checklist for my own clients who are like, oh, this makes it so easy to see what went on in my life. And I said, now let's talk about how it's showing up for you today as an adult.
Yeah. So the thing that you talked about, you can't change what you don't understand. What an aha, like for people who are listening to this and maybe you're not in the place that you want to be, right? The idea that you can't change what you don't understand. Here's a question for you. How well do you understand where you're at? And really at the end of the day, this introspection is the type of thing that we talk about on heCast all the time. This, allowing people the opportunity to potentially wake up and ask questions exactly like that. If I don't understand it, well, how can I change it? That is a perfect.
Know about it, because I didn't know about childhood trauma. And I'm like, childhood trauma? My childhood was normal. And that's what all my clients initially say to me. And then I'm like, well, no, I have that one and I have that one. It's like, oh, because my dad wasn't home much, that's an abandonment issue for me. So, it's very interesting to know what they are, then understand them deeper. And childhood trauma goes through at least 3 generations. So what did you have and mom and dad and their parents? So we have to look through the whole family system to dissect that. And it helps for forgiveness and understanding. And that's part of the healing process.
Okay. So, I mean, like here, let's talk about like that that word trauma. I think that it's a very misunderstood word. Like I said, I would go so far as to say it's co-opted in our society. When I hear somebody saying that they were traumatized because somebody said Mark instead of Mike on their Starbucks cup, I'm sorry. It's just that's not trauma. No. But at the end of the day, though, I also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and minimize, because you can't judge trauma. What somebody's trauma is, it doesn't matter where they came from. If somebody said the wrong thing at the right time, when we're young, that could be something that imprints and could be
It
that word. So
does.
could you describe in your mind what trauma actually is, and perhaps maybe what it isn't as
Actually,
well?
Mike, you had said it about a few minutes earlier. You said, well, what's big T trauma and little t trauma? And that's actually two terms that I want to discuss. So a
Yeah.
big T trauma is what most people would think trauma is: being in a car accident and losing your best friend, losing a
Yes.
limb, having a rape or molestation as a young child or a teenager. That's big T trauma. Everyone gets that. The little T traumas are more ongoing, everyday things that happen that young children just use to learn to adapt to in different ways.
Right.
And we'll go through the list and you'll see the difference between big T and little t trauma as I go through them.
Okay. And I'm grateful that you said it like that, because I think a lot of men out there, certainly the stigma that we have been, handed down in this time and place in society many times is to look at what you were talking about, the best friend dying in the car accident. Well, that didn't happen to me. I didn't have anything like that happens. Therefore, everything else must just be something that I can just, put on my shoulders and carry on with, when really at the end of the day, you get to a place where you can only walk for so long with that stuff.
Yeah.
And then it has to be reckoned with, and getting to a place where we can actually understand it, know that it's there, first off, identify it, and then understand it's there. It sounds like that's exactly what you try and get people to do. Is that do you find that with men? Is it
Yeah, we
yeah,
do it together as a team. That's why I love coaching versus counseling,
right,
because coaching is highly educational and we work as a team. So what we do is bibliotherapy with their notebook. It's like 150 pages. They fill out very simple forms. From what they tell me, I know what I have to teach them. So it's all personalized and interactive, but we work together. And I describe it like a rainbow. You're starting at, I don't know about this and I don't understand it.
right,
So then I have to start educating, right? So as they're learning, they're changing things and they're learning the trauma recovery and the mindset tools to feel better, even holistic remedies for wellness, vitamins, meditation, the spirituality. There's a lot of different things that I teach to help heal as they're learning more. Right. So they're learning, and then they're starting to see change because they're doing these new goals and learning these new techniques, and they feel better about themselves. And it doesn't happen. I mean, it happens pretty quickly, the initial changes. Some people say within 8 days to 2 weeks, they're starting to feel better. People at work say you're smiling more, you've got more energy. What are you doing? You look better. And by the end, they're actually in that pot of gold of where they just feel so amazing about themselves. The personal transformation is so huge. Then they look back. And the last exercise is we look back to module 2, and this is where you are. Judging your life wheel. Where are you with your friendships? How many friends do you have? How are you with your finances? How are you spiritually? How are you with a partner if you have one, or your confidence in dating? So we look at all of that, the whole life interaction. What are their goals and dreams? And when they're over here at the end, they're like, oh my God, these are all now 90 to 100%. They were like 10 to 25% in the beginning. So we do a lot of work together, but it's fun and it's exciting because they feel so much better as we get started with the transformation. So it's really great work.
Jumps like that. I mean, like, it just shows the power of awareness and mindfulness. And when you combine those two things together, how quickly things can change for people. You brought up the idea that there's going to be guys who are listening to this right now. You talk about the idea of being with someone who is toxic. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
There are guys who are listening to this that might be the toxic person and they don't even know. There's also a combination, like when you talk about a relationship and when you talk about these events that happen in childhood that may just be subtle, really, really subtle, and there is no awareness whatsoever, doesn't even know, and you help
Right.
obviously to mine these things out. It feels like when you put it in that perspective, if all of us who are in a relationship, we bring that stuff with us, they bring that stuff with them, and now, boy, oh boy, you mix this stuff, and that's where the fireworks can show up. But there are guys who are listening to this that might be the toxic person in their relationship without even knowing that.
A
Do you
lot of
ever
men
find
do
that?
know deep down when they come to me, Riana, I haven't been successful in my relationships, or the
Okay,
girls keep breaking up with me, or I know I'm lying to her, but I want that,
Hmm.
or I'm addicted to porn and I hide it, and if she knew, she would break up with me. So there's the secret life part of it, or
Right.
impulse. Um, and, it's funny, after I wrote Love Beyond Your Dreams, I sent the sample copy to my ex, and he goes, "Oh my God, I finally know what was wrong with me. Thank you for writing
Wow.
this book." And it's 400 pages. It's called The Guidebook to Love on Amazon. And I didn't know what was wrong with him. And that was what sought my journey. And he had 9 out of the 10 top traumas. So that
Wow.
also made me give some compassion and forgiveness and understanding to, he was really hurting emotionally. And he acted out in these certain ways for a band-aid, or to feel happy, or to feel good. And he learned, oh my God, I know what's wrong with me now, and I can fix this. Of course, I didn't work with him after that point. I said, well, find yourself a certified clinical trauma professional and get started, and, for your healing journey. But it really did help my journey in that research to be able to forgive him, knowing from the childhood traumas he grew up with.
So again, the idea of the listener out here who might be an ex to somebody, what a beautiful experience for you to have that kind of, if you want to call it closure, or
Mhm.
at least a little bit of repair, acknowledgement between the two of you, because then both of you can take that repair and you can take the healing from that and move it into wherever your life goes next time. There's a lot of guys right now who might be thinking, okay, I want to hear some of this stuff. So you talk about some of these top traumas. With men, and specifically, are there one or two or three on that list that kind of bubble up to the surface a little bit more than other ones, or is it across the board?
Yes, as I go through them, I will state the ones that I think men are mostly impacted by. But the interesting thing about the childhood trauma checklist, and people can get that on my website for free at RianaMilne.com if you can't write them
Mm-hmm.
down right now. So help
Mm-hmm.
yourself to that. But like I said, it's across cultures. It's works with straight or LGBTQ
Yeah.
individuals, younger, older, men, women. It doesn't matter. It was kind of blew my mind that this list, the generic list, there's no prejudice on it. It impacts all of us. So I'll start with number one, which is
Yeah.
growing up with any addiction in the family. And
Right.
most people in the ACE test just only said drugs and alcohol. Well, I'm a drug
Right.
and alcohol addictions counselor, so I have 12, okay, addictions that could impact you as a child if they existed in your primary family. So it's
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol, sex, meaning you knew your parent was a cheater and you
Yep.
kept the secret, porn
Yep.
use, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, social media addiction, and workaholism.
Yeah.
So if the parent is more involved in one of those addictions and the child's just kind of off to the side while they're on their phone constantly or on the computer, or the father that might be working all day, come home, eat dinner, then go into his office and just kind of ignore the child. These are samples of those types of addiction. Gaming
Okay.
addiction, I've had 14, 15-year-olds with gaming addiction that were skipping school and cursing out their parents, refusing to eat to be on their games. So these kind of addictions do impact the family. And if you've noticed any of those in your current family or past family, it's something to look at.
Okay. There you go.
The second one, which I think is one of the most impactful for everyone, men included, is verbal messaging. That's trauma too. So, did you hear the words, I love you, I'm proud of you, great job, kiddo?
Hmm.
Things that are accolades that made you feel good about yourself. Or was there messages of put down, like, I'm not sending you to college, you're not smart enough, why should I waste my money? Like, that's a verbal put down.
Mm-hmm.
Or the parent on the side of the football stadium screaming at his kid, "You're a moron, get the ball." These parent coaches that are
Yep.
constantly yelling at their kids. Really bad stuff. You're implanting these messages constantly over and over to the point where your child's afraid of you, or they don't even want to play the sport, or it's they're performing for their father just to get some love and accolades. So
Right.
this is verbal messaging is huge.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you mentioned it that way, because earning, like, you think, okay, well, no, I was brought up in a house where they told me they loved me all the time, and I felt all that, but was it unconditional? Well,
Mhm.
no, many times I had to go and I had to earn that in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
The only time I got that positive messaging was when I earned it. So I love that you made that distinction,
It's
because people
huge.
who grew up in that, is it possible that maybe I exhibit that with the people that are around me now, because that's what monkey see, monkey do,
That's what
right?
you know. It's called
Yeah,
normalization of the behavior. You
there you
normalize.
go.
My dad did it, and I turned out to be a good football hero, so I'm going to do it for my kid that way.
Yeah, yep,
And then you kind of
yep,
like bury down, the messages that weren't very positive. And it's funny, it's different generations too. Like I'm part of the baby boomer generation, and I was on the beach with 9 of my cohorts, and I told them, I said, did you hear the words, I love you? And everyone's like, no. And I said, I didn't either. And I
mm,
finally asked my mother, I was fourth out of 5 kids, and I was pregnant with her first grandchild. And I asked her, I was like, Mom, why don't you ever tell us kids that you love us? Well, I do. It's a response back.
yeah,
And I said, well, of course we know you do, Mom. You do all these things for us, but why don't you say the word? She goes, well, those aren't words I ever heard. I grew up in the Great Depression. My parents didn't tell me that. If we had food on the table, that was love.
yeah,
So now people that are like my daughter's ages, which are in their 40s, they got a lot of love and a lot of hugs because we didn't hear it. So it's like, well, when I'm a parent, I'm going to overload that, So it's different generations have
yeah.
different emotional responses to these verbal messages as well. So I think that's an interesting part to
Yeah,
look at.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad you talk about that, because again, I feel like I look at my father, and the issues that he had. We just lost him last year, and he grew up in horror, absolute horror. He ended up leaving the house and living as a man when he was 15 years old, and that's what he ended up having to do.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we grew up in a household with anger, lots of it,
Mm.
but I'll tell you this: he grew up like, I believe that every generation, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, tries to patch a hole in the bottom of the boat.
I try to do
I
better,
didn't
you
I
know.
didn't know alcohol in my house. There was no alcohol, not a drop of alcohol
Mm.
in my house. The first time I ever saw a house with alcohol was when I went for a sleepover when I was about 10 years old, and I saw it in somebody else's house. Why was that the case? My dad said, I will never live in a house with my family, will never have alcohol. So while of course he had shortcomings, there were things that he tried to bottom holes in the bottom of the boat that he tried to patch,
So
and
was
I
one
think
of
a
his
lot of us do
parents
that.
alcoholic?
Oh yeah, the horror that he grew up in was very much centered around alcohol and
Right.
and
Okay,
things like
there it
that.
is.
And so
Yeah.
so yeah, but not saying he was perfect, but that was a thing that he tried to solve. We love to, like, my granddaughter. Again, I'm all over her. Like, she will never ever not know that her pa loves her, right?
Yeah.
But what are the blind spots that I still have? And I think
Well,
that these
this
are
is
really good
interesting because
questions.
your father is what we call ACOA, adult child of an alcoholic, and I also say and other trauma, because
Yep.
once you
Oh
know the
yeah.
10 traumas, you'll know. But that
Yep.
test is also free on RianaMilne.com. So if anyone else similar to you had a father or parent, as a child of an alcoholic, there's the 3 generations right there impacting you. So they may not have the alcohol in the home, but the problem is they still have the anger that was never healed.
There
So
you
this
go.
comes out in verbal messaging as well. And they're
Yep.
fighting between mom and dad, right? Because their initial
Absolutely.
trauma was never healed. So it is passed down until you finally learn this education. And then, you work with it with your partner, and then you raise your children totally differently.
Yeah.
So, and
I
I've
appreciate this so much. This is so great. What's the third one?
I love seeing them brought up with this very emotional, loving home because my girls understand this work. So it's really awesome. Okay,
It's
so the
beautiful.
third one is any emotional abuse or neglect. So we mostly understand what that is, but a lot of reports also came out for the single working mom. In the 70s, when we married, there was a lot of divorces after because the women were expected to. I mean, there was even a commercial on it, Anjali. I can, bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and always prove that you're a man because I'm an
Sure.
Anjali woman. I don't know if you remember that commercial.
Yes, I do.
Do it all or you're less than a woman was the message. And eventually we're like, screw this, we're out of here. We need a
Yeah.
partner who's a teammate. Um, so there was a lot of divorce for your generation. You're a little bit older than my daughter, my two
Mhm.
girls, but they went through the divorce, of course. So, but they were saying the working mom that was neglecting their kids because they were latchkey kids. There
Mhm.
wasn't cell phones back then. There's only house phones and no baby cameras where you could say, okay, my daughter's home safely or ring.
Yep.
None of those devices that gave them that security. My daughter's home and everything's okay. But
Yep.
we had to work to support the family. So the childhood traumas, understanding them is not about blaming the parent. Most of them did the best they knew how. And the single
Yes.
mom was, well, we have to work to support our kids. And I had found a lot of the millennial men, like my son in laws, had a lot of love and dedication to their moms because they saw
Yep.
how difficult it was for her to hold that together and still give them love. And if she could give herself some self love,
Yep.
it was a difficult time. But that fell under some neglect. If the mom had to work all the time, she was out of the house, or they were
It's very
baby.
interesting that I find it very interesting that emotional abuse and neglect are in the same category, because you'd think that they're two different behaviors, but at the end of the day, the net result, it results in a similar trauma or trauma response.
So everything, Mike, is a 1 to a 10 level. 10 is the worst. One or two is okay. She had to work, but I understood that. We worked through it, and
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't really like being home alone.
I was
But
aware. I had
yeah,
awareness of things, because when you have
exactly.
awareness, again, it kind of takes the pressure out of the balloon, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's number
Okay.
three. Okay, number four, and this is inside or outside of the home. Any of these traumas, you could have a perfect home life, but not at school, or something happened to you in the community. Would be rape, molestation, or physical abuse, actually being hit. Working in the schools, I was the one that had to call DIFUS in New Jersey, the Division of Youth and Family Services. If my students said they were being hit by switches, which is a tree branch, or
Yeah.
an electrical cord. I even had a young boy raised by the grandmother because the mother was a drug addicted. The father was just gone, and she hit him with
Mhm.
metal trucks on his genitals. So, the things that you hear and see as a trauma counselor are quite sad. It's the degrees of 10 to 1. You can see why there's so much. And one of the statistics too was for men and boys, unfortunately, 4 out of 6 were molested or touched, and usually by someone they knew.
Wow.
So I work with a lot of men around that they feel shamed or they would never tell anybody. I've had men that ate so much food to just like not be desirable so they didn't have to be touched. So the impact on your mental health goes very deep when
Yeah.
these things are a part of your life. And those would be a big T trauma, of course, and one that's a big T trauma for men. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Women as well, but men also.
You mentioned
Um,
the shame earlier. I want to, I think it's really important to kind of throw out there. There are a lot of guys who hide things because of the idea of shame, and they might not even realize that that's what it is as well. And I think I'm grateful that you mentioned that. I just want to put an exclamation point on that, because, um, really at the end of the day, when the flashlight shines on things, it's not, I'm not saying it's not as hard. It's not hard, but at the end of the day, many times it's much easier than carrying the weight of the shame that
Absolutely.
is unknown. The known is many times easier than the unknown.
It is.
Again,
It's
this
getting it
is,
out there and sharing the secret, and that helps take away the shame. And it's like, there's nothing I haven't heard yet from any of my
yeah,
clients in all these years I've been working with men and women and couples. So they know I'm there, I'm on their side. It's like, I give them the compassion and the space to grieve that innocence that was lost, right?
yeah,
But they do understand that childhood trauma is not their fault. They didn't cause this. They were just a victim in this household that's all they knew. So that's why
yeah,
I say just covering it up or having a secret about it or, oh, it's my uncle. He's touching me because he loves me, and this is what he's saying he's doing, and rewriting that story. So as a child, you can accept it and just keep on with a somewhat normal life, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
But
glad you mentioned that though, because there's a lot of shame out there, and it's I don't want to say I don't want to minimize it, but I do want to say there's a lot of needless shame out there, and the
yeah,
needlessness is because of this ego or stigma or whatever it might be. And again, we're generalizing here. There's a lot of different stuff that's out there. Obviously, for guys who might be, if any of this is touching a nerve of any sort, go out and find out what it might be from somebody who can help you with
yeah.
that. But if
So
we're
I
if we're
think it
if we're
helps to normalize it a little bit. Like 4 out of 6
yeah,
boys were touched inappropriately, and just that the stigma of, this happens more than you realize, and in 2021 childhood trauma research, another researcher said 100% of us have some of these traumas. So you're not different if you have them. We all have something, so it's
yeah,
just identifying what it is, how it happened. It's like factual
yep.
identification. Okay, yes, this happened. So how is this causing me grief now in my adult life? And then healing that, right?
I'm gonna get really, really, really vulnerable. I'm gonna say something I've never said on the podcast before. Okay, and it's a question that's kind of related to this, because that, to my knowledge, never happened to me when I was a child. But I will say this: when I was in the second grade, a gal in my neighborhood and I, we played some doctor.
Right.
And it was I would, even now thinking back on it, consider it to be a very, I don't even want to, if I'd call it a pause. It was a playful experience.
Right.
I was led into it, but it wasn't a coercion of any sort. There was that sort of a thing. But at that point, when you talk about the idea of innocence lost, can those types of events lead to what it is that we're talking about, patterns that develop all the way into adulthood when things like that happen?
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I have young children that have experienced that. There's a certain age where it's just childhood curiosity.
Yes, I
I'll
would
show
put
you
this in
mine if you
that
show me
category.
yours, and
Yeah,
nobody's hurt, no one's manipulated, nobody is forced upon.
yeah,
It's kind of is childhood play and curiosity.
yeah.
Of course, when the parents find out, they blow it up, they make it a big deal, and it's like, oh
Oh
my God,
yeah.
I feel ashamed about my body. Okay, so if
As
that
I was talking, I was realizing there's a good chance my mother will listen to or watch this show, and she does not know that this is the case. So yes, I hear that. Even at
see how
50
men
years old,
open
I
up
hear
and
that.
talk to me, Mike, it's pretty
There it
easy.
is. There it is.
Yeah. So, but there's a certain age where it's not. So if there's a
Right.
7-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy, he's of the
Right.
age now to know that's not appropriate.
Right.
Right. So you really have to make the distinction when I have somebody in front of me, if this was childhood curiosity or if it's manipulative. Right. So
Right. And but does the childhood curiosity part still leave some of the lingering things that can move into adulthood at that point, or would you say
if
it's
they were caught and how their parents handled it,
oh,
perhaps
there you go. There you go.
shame,
Okay.
or you shouldn't be showing your body to anyone and
Right.
that's dirty what you're doing, or again, verbal messaging
Yeah. There
and
you
how
go.
things are handled. Or do you educate your child? Well, it's normal for you to be curious. Let's read some books about boy and girl bodies and why they're different. That's a whole different approach than you should be ashamed of yourself, right?
Yep.
So this is
100%.
why parents need to be educated on what childhood trauma is and are they raising their children in an emotionally healthy environment.
But you're certainly showing how, I think you're doing a really good job showing how these patterns from then can then lead to, patterns through adolescence, patterns through young adulthood, patterns into when you get into long-term relationships as an adult. And these things, we don't even know that they're there. And this is why this exploration is so important. I want to make sure we get through the whole list. So let's keep going.
Okay. One other thing about the sexual, some men
Yes.
kind of brag, well, I was only 10 and a 14-year-old girl came on to me and
Mm-hmm.
wow, now, I'm a young man, and they kind of brag about that, but they're often the men that are turned on to pornography early. It's like this
Ah,
switch in the brain that goes on. And, now they're always curious. It's like cocaine to a young person, or
Right.
drinking alcohol when you're 12. It's the addiction part of the brain. The earlier you start, the worse the scenario will be as you get older.
Okay.
So they kind of take it as a bravado thing, but in a lot of ways, it could be messing with their relationship, or they could be hypersexual, oversexed, needing
Right.
sex every day. And if their
Right.
woman doesn't give it to them, they're mad or they're upset, or they brag on their first or second date. Well, you should know I'm highly sexual. And I
Right.
said, the women, run from that because that's something they haven't really dealt with. It's more of a conquest or a bragging thing.
Right.
This goes very deep. There's a ton of examples we could go into, but we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's move on to the
Okay.
next one. Okay, hold on. Before we do, for a guy who's listening to no, I'm just saying it because I always try and come from the perspective of if there's a guy listening to this right now that might be that guy.
Yeah.
So the guy who hears that and has sort of a light bulb moment at that point, is there one or two things that you could kind of throw their way, like a couple little nuggets there that might show them,
Yeah.
first off, they're not alone. Obviously, they're not alone. Hey, you're not alone if this is you right now.
Right.
I think that's very powerful right there. But is there anything else that you would throw at that
I
person?
have a lot of couples where the concern is porn addiction and porn use. And I always recommend Out of the Shadows by Patrick Carnes, who is one of the leading mental health practitioners on pornography addiction. And his wife is Stephanie Carnes, and her book is called Mending a Shattered Heart. So I always recommend those two. And I actually had a sexual addiction expert on my podcast, Lessons in Life and Love. So they can go into my lessonsinlifeandlove.com and listen to a deeper dive into that whole issue there.
Thanks, Rihanna. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much. I just the guy who hears that and says, now what? I like to just provide now what's if we can a little bit.
Sure,
so thank you
course.
so much for that.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
Okay, so the next one, what are we up to? Number 5. Okay, this is a big one. This is around abandonment. So I named 2 types, fault and no fault abandonment. So a no fault abandonment, an example, if a parent happens to die early, if the parent was deployed to war, or if they had to travel quite a lot to support the family. Because the kids feel, I remember growing up that way, but we didn't know where my dad was. We later find out when we get letters from Ronald Reagan and William Casey, he was FBI and CIA. But I remember as a kid saying, where's dad? When's daddy coming home? And my mom would be, well, I don't know where he is. I'm like, well, why not? And that was like a normal question in our family. Where's dad? Or when's he coming home? And we just didn't know. But that's a no fault abandonment. That's how he supported the family.
Right.
Then there's a fault abandonment. This is if you never see your child, if you were together and there's a divorce or a breakup, and then you barely see your child, or you promise to see your child and don't deliver on that promise. Or you're there in the room, but you're not interacting with the child. Now, of course, working in the schools, I have therapy with a lot of kids. And I remember one little boy saying, well, I don't want to go to my dad's. He just sits there and watches football. So I'm in my room just playing on my computer. Why should I even go there when he doesn't even talk to me? Now, that's a fault abandonment. He feels isolated, left alone, not played with, not going on an adventure day somewhere. So that's one thing I always work with my clients when they're there. How is your parent-child relationships? Let's fix them. Let's start talking honestly with your kids and sharing your emotions and say, I'm proud of you, kid. And great job. I saw you trying so hard out there. And if he says, well, I didn't get a basket in basketball, and goes, that's okay. You tried your best. So dad's really proud of you for that. These kind of verbal messages are king. Really important.
You talk about abandonment, abandonment and neglect. Are they the same thing? Are they a little bit different from each other, but cousins?
To me, it's different. It's its own category. Yeah. And like I said, the ACE test didn't even have abandonment in there. And I saw so much of that everywhere that I was. I'm like, how could they miss abandonment? So, kids normalize more when, it's a no fault abandonment. Of course, like I would see in the schools, the kids' grades go down and then they're diagnosed ADHD. I'm I'm like, that child's not ADHD. His father's over in Iraq and scared to death he won't come home.
Oh man, yeah.
So he's coming in traumatized, ongoing. And the truth is, in the body, when cortisol is up, memory and focus is down. So the
Yep.
kid's kind of just checked out emotionally, glaring out the window. I might have seen news reports the night before or hearing news stories, and it's scary for these little ones, right? So, unfortunately, they have removed what they call the SAC counselors, which is what I did, the emotional mental health and wellness counselor from the schools. This should be the first person to be hired even before a football coach, because every child needs emotional wellness and support to talk about these fear-based issues. And I did a lot of behavioral modification with these kids. So they weren't ADHD. We did meditation, we did music therapy, we did positive reinforcement, where there's a treasure chest. And if they'd had a star that day, they could reach into the treasure chest and get a prize. And just talk about, well, I miss my dad, where is he going to come home, and normalizing that feeling for that child. So he can really talk to it about someone, because he can't talk to his mom about it because mom's already freaked out. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's all these different things that go on in life. Right now is a very scary time, the time of COVID, where kids couldn't even go to school. Those children now are like, I have grandchildren in that age range, 12 to 9 through 12, 13 in that age group for those 4 years. Couldn't go to school, worried if mom or dad goes out to work, are they going to come home alive? We're hearing all these deaths. That's a big trauma.
Absolutely.
Okay? That's called community trauma, by the way. Okay.
Before we go to the next one, I really want to just say how grateful I am for this conversation, because, guys who might be listening to this might be in a place where, oh gosh, that was me. But there are also a lot of fathers who listen to this. Yeah. And so what you're doing also is you're turning on light bulbs for fathers that are out there, again, for things they might even know exist. And now that there's a potential awareness or mindfulness that's there as well. So thank you again for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's really important. And I always teach as if they are parents or will be parents one day. And also, how did they grow up? So looking at all these different generations. Okay, so that's number 5, around abandonment. Number 6 is if you're a part of the foster care system, had to go live at somebody else's house because your parents couldn't keep you, or were sent away, like the foster care system. And I worked with a lot of kids in foster care, so they deserve their own category. And sometimes children of adoption feel like, oh, well, my parents didn't love me, they gave me up, even though the adoptive parents were fabulous. There's still that emptiness. Why did my birth mother love me or want me? Right. So that's number 6. And even going to live at someone else's house, even if it's grandma or an aunt or a family friend, you still feel disposed from your mom or dad. Right.
Yeah. So get that out there. Let's get the awareness there so you can unpack some of that stuff. Yep.
Okay. Number 7 is personal trauma. And this is a big one for men and women. So this is if you felt different in any way. So you could have been a chubby child and teased for that, or tall, skinny, and gawking, called the nerd, which I was. You could have been, gay or lesbian coming out in school and your kids or your family rejected you. You could have been, the only African-American in an all-Caucasian school, so you felt different because of that. So, there's so many reasons you felt different. Identified as ADHD or pulled out for special classes, and you're embarrassed about that. And I see all these dynamics at the schools, right? So I was really hands-on working with the kids going through these things. So any way that you felt different, that's basically trauma 7. Personal
and hey,
trauma.
Everybody, who isn't in that category, right?
Been bullied.
And think about that. Like, think about your childhood. Who wasn't in that category? Again, you're not alone. And
That's
sometimes little things like that. For me, I was told I had a big nose growing up. You know what? I unpacked it. I'm glad I unpacked it. But that was one of those things that for about 2 years in elementary school, I carried with me for a long time. It was made. There was 2 comments that people made. It was one day of being made fun of by 2 people.
It was yesterday. Yeah.
There it is. So again, small t, but long effect. So again, not alone. All right, let's keep going.
Okay. So trauma 8 is around siblings. sibling trauma. So
Mm-hmm.
3 ways this could show up. One, a sibling of yours was born with a medical issue, so that commanded more of mom's and dad's time, and you felt kind of alone because they always said, well, you're okay. We have to help your brother or your sister. The child understands it, but it doesn't mean they didn't feel alone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another one
Absolutely.
is the sibling bullied them, beat them up, the older brother, I want to teach you to be tough, these kinds of things, or the third one where a lot of women felt this, I think, more maybe than the men, but there was always like the sibling hero or what we call the golden child. I grew up fourth out of five, but in between two brothers, and my brothers were all American water polo swimmers, which is great. I loved my brothers. It didn't
Yeah.
cause rift between us, but it was really evident that my mom favored the boys. But why did
Mm-hmm.
she? These were the men of the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I had sister, brother, me, brother. So they were her golden child, and complimenting them. And, I was always the one that had to work harder to get some attention or get a compliment. My first
Yep.
compliment was when I was 50, when my book, Love Beyond Your Dreams, went on #1 bestseller on Amazon. My mom's there. It's a really great book. I read the whole thing, and I'm telling my ladies at Bridge about it. I'm like, you are? Like, I was shocked I got a compliment. So these are things I remember, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, my first compliment when my mom said I did a good job. But of course, it gave me worth ethic. So,
Yeah.
a successful entrepreneur of several businesses, and so you find the good from the bad, and this is part
Yeah.
of rewriting the story of trauma healing. This happened, but what good can we find from what happened? That's just an example. So that's
It's
sibling.
fantastic. That's okay. So sibling, what's the next one? I'm the only reason that we're rushing through it, everybody, is because she's got a client coming up, and I've been told that we got to keep it under an hour now.
Male
So
client,
anyway, but what's the next one?
Okay. Number 9 is 2. I had to move it down number 11 because it came so prevalent. Number 11 was community trauma. So the example is COVID, our Mother Earth events, flood, fires, hurricanes, where it wipes out entire communities. And of course, this war, any kind of war, is a community trauma.
Yeah.
And it mixes with family trauma, which was always number 9. So that could be growing up in an area of poverty, struggling financially, dad losing jobs,
something medical,
medical in the family,
Yep.
and the parents, being incarcerated, so any kind of family trauma. And then number 10 is one of the hardest ones as well, mental health issues in mom or dad. And the 2 most difficult is borderline personality, which I'm going to describe as when they were good, they were great. When they were bad, they were horrid. And the kid never knew what they were going to get. When they opened the door from school that day, is dad going to be in a good mood or is he going to scream at me today? You didn't know. And it keeps the child always on edge. And most of my clients coming to me have ongoing anxiety. And it's from these personality disorders. The other one is bipolar. And that's manic depressive. A lot of people think manic phase is a high and happy phase. Well, it could be, let's say you're gambling and you won $2,000 and you feel great. You go back an hour later and you lose $5,000. Now you don't have the mortgage money and you're depressed for 2 months, right? So a manic phase is always followed by the depression stage. And that's a hard one to live with, but borderline, I think, is the most challenging.
The ups and downs, and I think a lot of us. That was something my father had. He was a borderline personality disorder, and it's exactly like you say. The fight or flight almost never turned off.
Yeah.
For us, we didn't know what was going to happen. It got to the point where I was so astute. I think it's where my curiosity comes from. I actually think it's why I'm a good podcast host in both my shows, because I'm naturally curious.
Yeah.
But I think it came from a dark place. I could tell the way that dad would drive into the driveway,
if he was in a good mood or
what kind of mood he was in. I could tell the way, never mind the way he would slam the door or whatever. That was the early stuff. I could actually tell by the way he drove in at 5 o'clock every day. I knew. And that was something that, again, the idea when you don't know what you're going to have in a household, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a parent, whatever it is, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
constantly on edge, that's going to lead to some stuff. The good news is, though, is that there are solves for these things. Identifying and awareness is a huge one, and there are exercises and things that we can do for that. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you this. You've got an AI, Riana, which is so interesting to me. You've got an actual,
So
you've taken
excited
things
about it.
technologically into the next step. Does your AI version of you know all of these things? And is
Yes.
this the perspective that I guess she, for lack of a better term,
Yes.
comes from?
It's called RianaAI, and it's located at lovecoachonline.com.
Yeah.
Lovecoachonline.com. And there's either a text bot where you can type in your question and it will answer. But the one I love the most, it looks like I'm on Zoom. It's me on Zoom, actually. And you just talk to your computer. Hey, Riana, I broke up with my girlfriend. I'm pretty depressed about it. My name's Jim. And my avatar would say, hey, Jim, nice to meet you. I'm really sorry to hear about your breakup. Let's talk about what you can do.
Oh my gosh.
So it is trained on my Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams books, my courses, 40 years of teaching mindset for success. Since my 20s, I've been teaching that. My licensed mental health work, my trauma recovery work, everything. I have been feeding this and waiting for AI to get developed enough so that I could put it out there. And the main goal for this, which I absolutely love, is it talks in any language. So you can talk Japanese to my avatar, it will talk Japanese back. And I can't do that. So I couldn't help people around the world except if they understood English. Now it can be anybody, anywhere, and it's 24/7. You can sign on when you want, especially all, most distress happens at night or fights with your partner happen at night. Sure. You just sign on. Hey, this just happened. What should I do to calm her down? Okay, let's talk about it. Here's some things you can do. Boom, instant answers, solution focused, and all trained on my work exclusively. That's
life is trippy. We live in weird times. That is so trippy what you just described. Did you ever, at the beginning, you've been doing this for 40 years, at the beginning of your career, did you ever even fathom the idea that you would have something that you just described out there, an AI version of yourself that can be there and it can kind of throw things out, be a beautiful gateway for people to show them potentially an avenue for solution? Did you even think for a second that would be possible?
5 years ago, I was talking to tech teams to say, can you do this for me? Can you do? No, it's not developed yet. I'm like, okay. So as soon as I knew it was out, I went to work on it. I brought it out Valentine's Day. So it's about a month old. And I'm so proud of it. It's so exciting. It's lovecoachonline.com. And there's a free trial right now. And you can get the ebook, Have the Love You Deserve, for free just for trying it. The video chat is $5 for 3 days because I have to pay on each usage, obviously. The text bot is a little bit more economic for me. So that's just a free trial. And it's really exciting, really good stuff. So if they can't reach me or they speak in a different language than me, they still can get the help that they need in trauma, childhood trauma, and love trauma recovery.
And where is it again? Lovecoachonline. Is that what it is? Lovecoachonline.com?
Yes.
What a wonderful URL. Congratulations on getting that. That's fantastic too. I just, to close it up, I know time is slippery when we do these things, and I just appreciate your time. I hope you come back one day. We can dive even a little bit deeper.
There's so much more to cover, Mike.
Well, there is. I know.
We didn't do how this shows up now as an adult, so we're going to have to do a part 2 here.
I can't wait. I mean that. Like, let's do a part 2. I can't wait. As we kind of finish up and close off the first one, guys that are out there that are feeling this, they're feeling that a twig, something that their relationship isn't right. They are toxic. They're with someone who's toxic. Do you have any kind of overarching parting words before we close up this episode?
Yeah. I mean, my slogan is always this, life is short. Now is the time to create the life you desire and have the love you deserve. You can meet with me to do these 5 simple assessments for 2 hours for only $97. You can order that at my website, RianaMilne.com, where you can find those free tests. You can do the free test, but I don't get a copy of it. If you do the discovery session with me for 2 hours, I get the tests, we dissect them, and we come up with a blueprint to help your healing journey. So it's real simple to meet with me. I may be international and global, but I'm very small town in my service.
What I find is that the $97 for something like that is certainly never the issue. The issue is getting out of our own way. The issue is many times admitting that we need the help and then taking the step to do it. You're not alone. This is exactly why we do the show. Guys that are out there, keep fighting the good fight. I just appreciate you, Riana, for taking time out of your insane schedule. I know how busy you are. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.